How much does emotional regulation actually influence leadership outcomes?
You have to believe what the other person is telling you. You have no other choice.
What are the emotional patterns that become red flags?
Thinking about your emotions is not very easy. It is very, very difficult because you have that fraction of second.
Leaders who seek validation and who kind of make you feel uncomfortable clearly put off the whole team, and there is no rallying factor in the team.
I often get asked by my team members that, Mukund, don't you get angry? Don't you get upset? And the only answer to that when I speak with them is that, do you really think if I get angry, the outcome would be better?
Most leadership advice sounds good, but very little of it is real. Real leadership, as per me, isn't learned from a playbook. I learned it from mistakes that I made in my work. I learned it from the wrong decisions that I took. I learned it in moments which nobody ever prepared me for. Leadership Unboxed strips leadership down to a level that it really matters. How leaders are assessed, how potential is evaluated, how leaders who will follow growth versus stagnate are separated. The lot that does it, the executive search professionals. Very critical component in the whole hiring process. If you want to really lead with intention and not just with time, you have arrived at the right place, because we are going to discuss with leadership recruiting professionals about their executive search initiatives on various topics like humility, like executive presence, like the hiring traits they look for, how to really work on your resume, and a whole lot of different things that will come extremely handy when you start preparing for the next big change in your career. Welcome to Leadership Unboxed. Hi Mukund, welcome to Leadership Unboxed.
Hi Pamela, good morning. Thanks for having me here for this conversation.
That's a very crucial topic, leadership presence and emotional regulation. A lot has been spoken in the recent times about EQ as compared to IQ.
Yeah.
So we're taking it a little further in the leadership parlance on what emotional regulation in a leadership role looks like and how people really work through it in terms of making their presence felt. I would invite you to introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about your journey.
I come with almost 1.5 decades of work experience, majorly in HR. I joined an organization as a management trainee into HR and continued to be with them for almost 1.5 decades. Had a fantastic journey, got to learn a lot. I seem to have done well in the organization and practically got to work in all the verticals of HR, from HR operations to business partnering to talent acquisition, learning and development. And I went on to becoming the group corporate HR head of the organization. Post that, it was the right time for me to think of exploring something outside of my comfort zone. And I landed up into the executive search space. I lead the HR practice, which means I try to find the right HR leaders for the organization in their context. That's what I do. This is across all the industries, and it's been a little more than 1 year that I have been doing this work. I'm based here in Bangalore with my family.
Thank you so much, Mukund, for giving us that background. We often mistake presence for, at least I used to do that in the past. Presence is all about confidence, articulation, charisma. But I think, and I have realized this in the last few years of my leadership roles, in senior leadership conversations, presence is really about how you show up under pressure. And over the years, especially as I have moved into different roles, I realized something very uncomfortable. Technical excellence gets you to certain level, because I started my career with a technical role. It gets you into the room. But you have presence, you have technical knowledge, and you don't know how to emotionally regulate yourself, right? So emotional regulation, according to me, kind of determines whether you stay there, on the chair that you are assigned to, right? And that's why today's conversation really matters. And Mukund, you sit in a very unique seat, right? You watch leaders at their best and at the most unguarded, often when the stakes are very high, right? Because they are very vulnerable, sharing with you everything because you are trying to evaluate them for those critical roles, right? So I'm excited to unpack how leadership presence and emotional regulation actually show up through an executive recruiter's lens. And it cannot start without understanding what is your take on leadership presence, especially at senior levels, and how do you define it? What are the subtle signals that tells you early in a conversation that somebody really has it?
Pamela, honestly, because, and you rightly picked up that the technical skill, and it is very important. You cannot do anything unless you technically know what you're doing. But it helps you till a point, right? And again, you used a very interesting word that I get a chance to speak with a lot of leaders or meet with a lot of leaders when they are unguarded. That's the real moment of evaluation or moment of truth, honestly, Pamela, because it's more about how you are as an individual. It all boils down to authentically how are you able to make the impact around people who are around you, right? Now, let's say when I, as an executive search practitioner, when I go out and speak with people, the leadership presence goes way beyond the way you look, the way you groom yourself, you present yourself, the way we are talking. It is more about how comfortable you are in your skin, how you are making the other person feel when you are talking to them. How do you respond to something which goes not according to your plan, or when you are under pressure? It's more about how comfortable people feel around you, how vulnerable you can be with a lot of grace, and with a lot of comfort. I think these are the things that define more about the leadership presence than anything else, because I keep talking to a lot of people who are like superb when it comes to their technical skills. When you get into conversation around things which is beyond their work, you get to see the real person, and the kind of instances they talk about, the kind of failures and humbling experiences they talk about. That is when you get to see how the leader is, and these are the things that tell a lot about how emotionally regulated the person is. And I think that is where you really see the emotional regulation and the real authentic leadership trait of the person.
What resonated with me in what you said is presence stops being more about impressive, and it's moving beyond the actual physical presence of how you show up. It's more about how steady you are in crisis, in difficult times. And I have, in my operating role, I have seen that leaders who have been commanding the room were never the loudest. They were the ones who could sit without rushing to fill silence. I've seen crisis prone situations where the leaders are deliberating something and there's utter silence because nobody knows how to fix it. And the person who is commanding the room, I have seen so many of them, the actual good ones, they don't rush to kind of, fill that silence. They hold that space for the team, right? Allow people to think. And in my own case as a leader, I feel my own presence also, slips when I try to prove something rather than simply holding the space. So cruising through crisis, holding the space is what I heard from you is super important. And how the person shows up, regulating how they are feeling about the whole situation. Like, one of my bosses used to say this, Pamela, you have to be that duck who is pedaling very hard. Nobody sees it because that's how you regulate, how you hold the team. How much does emotional regulation actually influence leadership outcomes? Because you don't get to see the person working. You are believing what they're saying. What are the emotional patterns that become red flags for you?
Interesting, very interesting, Pamela, because it's not easy. And like you rightly said, that in any interview conversation or any such conversation, you have to believe what the other person is telling you. You have no other choice. There's a couple of elements here. I think what I look for, and I very closely connect with this point, is any leader highly probable to suit a particular leadership position will have their own way of connecting with you or engaging with you in their own story. Right now, fudging the facts can reveal itself very, very easily. You just need to have the eye and ears for that. But the maneuvering the entire conversation through good parts of it and not so good part of it is something which tells you how authentic the person is. So I'll give you an example, right? Many a times I look at people. So my previous organization, I was in an environment which constantly had to go through some other crisis because of the nature of work that we used to do. Now, I have had many leaders who, like you said, were the ones who would start screaming at top of their voice because they thought that was the way to navigate through crisis. But the real good leaders were the ones who were the most comfortable in the room, who were the people who did not need any validation, who did not rush to make a point and prove something to others. They were the leaders who knew and who accepted that the problem at hand is not something that can be done in an instant like this. The whole environment of safety was created around that leader. And you can feel it when you are also having a conversation with a senior leader. Do you feel intimidated or you feel very comfortable around the person? You need to tread very safely while talking to the person, or you feel that you can have a free flowing, honest, open conversation with the person. Do you think the person is very comfortable and proud of talking about all the accomplishments and the good things that they have done? At the same time, are they really comfortable and graceful while talking about their failures failures, their learnings, their humbling experience. I have met many people who, with the slightest change in the plan, they lose their cool. And while they may not show it on your face, but you can sense it, right? Okay, the person did not like it. But the whole idea here is, and I'll tell you, I have practiced it personally for so many years now. People who can think about their own emotions objectively are the ones who will reflect a very, very positive trait when you are sitting with them as an evaluator or an executive search practitioner. Or to put it very, very simply, that thinking of your own emotion without clouding your judgment or without clouding the reality is something which is very important for the person. And you can make it, Pamela. Believe me, when you have conversations with people when they are unguarded, you can make these things very clearly. And for any leader, no matter what function, no matter what organization or industry it is, for any leader, this is a very, very important trait. Because please understand that my job as an executive search practitioner is not to place somebody in an organization. My responsibility is to marry two right elements so that the success is brewed there. So that's how I would put it across.
Yeah, so two very key things you said, I just felt, oh my God, he's just saying things that I exactly feel. Leaders who seek validation and who kind of make you feel uncomfortable clearly put off the whole team, and there is no rallying factor in the team.
Yes.
And the second thing is a leader who doesn't know how to objectively look at their emotions. That kind of really makes it very, very tough for people to deal with. The other side, like people who are actually attending interviews or actually going through leadership, roles or getting hired, how aware are they about being dysregulated? Give us an example, if you can, where you found a candidate who was dysregulated and they were not aware.
A lot of examples, Pamela. And if you ask me, do they get to know whether they are not regulated? The answer is yes and no. I strongly believe that there are certain innate traits or qualities that you have. Now, I'll take my own example, okay? Thinking about your emotions is not very easy. It is very, very difficult because you have that fraction of second before you react or respond to something. Now, if you ask me, is everybody aware of it? It takes practice. You need to be aware of it. You need to consciously do it.
Absolutely. I have learned it the hard way that emotional regulation isn't about suppressing emotion, right? We're not asking you to not exhibit what you feel. Objectively looking at your emotion. You should not allow the emotion to hijack your judgment. I'll give you an example. Early in my career, I used to mistake, I feel urgency is like, passion. If you're passionate, you have to do everything at speed. Over time, I realized urgency often communicates a lot of insecurity.
I'll tell you, I'm very similar to what you're saying. I often get asked by my team members that, Mukund, don't you get angry? Don't you get upset? And the only answer to that when I speak with them is that, do you really think if I get angry, the outcome would be better? The quality, the sheer quality of absorbing the pressure or stress or whatever is going on and channelizing it in a right way, not just downloading it exactly the way you received it, is something that the good leaders are very good at.
Very often the industry complicates presence with performance. Do you think leaders sometimes over-index on performance and under-index on presence when they present themselves to you? And if they do, where does this exactly hurt them the most?
The way I look at it is that I see or I talk to people who speak about their performances, the outcomes, the number output that they delivered, and less about how people around them have been or how they have been with the people or how they have groomed people throughout their journey. Now, I think to put it in one statement, Pamela, the impact you make on others is the most valuable currency that there is. Is performance overemphasized? Probably yes or no, because performance is important. The performance numbers are important. I mean, without that, you and I or any organization or any person will not exist. Is presence underemphasized? Oh, yes. Unfortunately, yes. Because look at it like this. When you are going through a journey, there will be good times, high times, and there will be crisis and difficult times. The leader will have to ensure that the journey is completed. At the end of the journey, as a leader, when you look back, what do you see? Your warriors, your soldiers standing with you, all wounded, all heads high in pride, having unflinching trust and faith in you, and a lot of admiration and genuine respect for you. You see that when you look back, or you see all the fallen warriors or wounded warriors, which are where majority of them are regretting. Leader is leader because of the followers, right? And the followers or the people who you're working with are, if they feel safe with you, no matter what pressure, what crisis is, if they feel valued, if they feel respected, even if there are failures, they will always genuinely love you, respect you, and stand with you. And that's the differentiator.
I've also seen that, if presence is missing, it quietly erodes trust, which is a very critical factor. As a leader, I would want to have extreme trust from my team. So if trust is eroding because of how I show up, despite the fact that I'm producing results, performance alone cannot cover that trust.
There's no trade-off here. I have seen multiple times the leaders who most of the people want to work with are not the ones who are always nice and they don't put any pressure on the team. Probably they are the ones who make the teams work the hardest. But at the same time, they are the leaders who know how to maintain the balance, how to strike a balance, and how to ensure that everybody feels valued, respected, and recognized in their team.
We cannot again let you go without asking this last question. I'm sure the audience is looking for advice as always, and advice coming from a person like you would really mean a lot because it comes from practical experience. So if you were advising mid managers or emerging leaders listening to this podcast, what are the one or two things they can start doing right now to build relationships and leadership presence and emotional regulation?
All right, I think this is a tricky one, honestly, because it's very personal to everybody. Because a personality is a mix of hundreds of things, and all of us know that, right? So it's not that easy to understand, explain, or modify. A couple of things that I think people can certainly do, and I think people should do is one. Objectively look at yourself. Think about the kind of situations you have been in. How was your response? How was the response of people around you to what you did and how you were behaving? Just reflect on all those things. It is very important. Easier said than done. But I think this is one of the ways that we can look inside of us and reflect on the things that we think we could have done better. And these are the things, you will realize that matter a lot when it comes to your leadership presence or how people perceive you or perceive your emotional regulation and balance. I think second thing, Pamela, is it's spoken about a lot, but not everybody takes it very seriously. I think it is important to seriously and genuinely seek feedback. And you need to figure out who would be the right person to give you a very, very honest feedback, who would be your mirror, who could tell you that these are the things, what you really need to change or think about or work upon. So I think genuinely seeking feedback, objectively looking at those feedback and comments and just figuring out by yourself what are the places or what are the areas you could do better in order to make people perceive you more authentically. Again, what I understand from my experience, it's not that easy to modify your own behavior, your own traits. It's part of our personality, as I said. But yes, I don't think there's anything that we cannot modify or improve with practice. So yes, it's all about accepting that I need to improve on something and then reflecting upon where all I can improve and then working on it.
What I hear is a little more self-awareness about how you are conducting yourself, reflecting on your behavior with a very positive intention, then making those atomic changes, right? Daily practicing of habits that will actually get you where you see yourself in an ideal state, right? I was very strongly inspired by this book, Man's Search for Meaning. I was given this book during a leadership. Yeah, during a leadership retreat. And in that book, there was a very profound quote by the author around how do you take a pause before you respond, right? Between your response and that point when you have that thought, you really can do a lot of thinking. And what I did, like an atomic habit that I have been practicing, is whenever I am responding and I'm a little disturbed or not so sure, I try to ask myself, am I responding from fear, ego, source of the thought, right? This single question that I have been asking myself or practicing to ask myself immensely improved the way I show up in meetings, even in difficult conversations. Yeah.
Since we are speaking about books, I'll tell you one book that really made a huge impact on me during my early years of life. The book named Emotional Intelligence by Daniel Goleman. It talks about the similar things. What is it that emotional intelligence means and how it changes you if you become aware of your emotions?
Yeah, it's a very powerful recall and a call out. Thank you so much for bringing that up because it's so relevant to what we just discussed, right? Yeah. We started the conversation with how EQ is becoming so important, how emotional regulation is so critical. We had a wonderful conversation. And as we close this discussion, what personally stands out for me, leadership presence is not about being unshakable, right? You can crumble. stumble, you will have your highs and lows. It's all about self-awareness.
True.
And I also learned from you that emotional regulation isn't a soft skill, right? It's a leadership multiplier. So, any closing thoughts, Mukund, before we wrap this beautiful conversation up?
Firstly, I would definitely want to thank you for this conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I sincerely hope that there would be something for the people who are going to watch this, and there would be something for them to reflect upon. The only thing I would say, and of course, since we are very specifically talking about this entire leadership space, executive search or leadership search and all, I think being authentic, being aware of yourself and your surrounding, and being very, very engaging into the current situation or current moment is something very, very important when we talk about this entire leadership search and leadership position and leadership evaluations.
Thank you so much for bringing that executive search professional's lens into this conversation. To everyone listening, leadership is not about building yourself in moments of control, but it is in moments of uncertainty. We discussed a lot about that. If this episode resonated with you, sit with it, observe yourself this week. Mukund shared some very valuable insights with his practical experience. Presence starts with awareness, as he mentioned towards the end. So this was Leadership Unboxed. We were just not talking about leadership. We tried to unpack it for you to whatever extent possible. Thank you for listening in. If this conversation made you pause, even briefly, then it did its job. Leadership isn't built through answers alone. It's built through better questions practiced over time. If you would like more conversations like this, subscribe to the channel. And if there's a question you're wrestling with right now, leave it in the comments. That's often where the next conversation begins.